John Hagee, one of America's most popular evangelists, as well as one of Israel's most vocal supporters.
From the shock and the devastation.
From his mega church in San Antonio, his message can be heard on television and radio throughout America and the world.
He will set his throne on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem.
He's also a best-selling author. His newest book, In Defense of Israel, warns of the impending nuclear threat caused by Iran. And it makes a case that the U.S. must act now.
Undercutting the brave and heroic efforts of our military forces in Iraq.
Could the threat from Islamic extremists be a sign of the end times? And is the apocalypse almost upon us? The Reverend John Hagee joins me for an hour of honest questions tonight. Hello, America, and welcome to the program. We got a guest tonight. Some people say that he speaks his mind and he says the things that nobody is willing to say anymore. Others say he's a crazy man. Tonight, you decide for yourself. He's Pastor John Hagee. Welcome to the program, sir. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here, Glenn Beck. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I want to talk to you tonight about the things that people in the sane world just don't say, and that is we're living in the end times. You believe that?
I do indeed, and I believe the Bible is very specific to the fact that we do live in the end of days.
Okay. I want to get into the top 10 things of, what makes you say, because people have been saying that forever.
Yes.
They're saying, the apostles said Jesus is coming back. They thought he was coming back right away. We're 2,000 years down the line and he still hasn't come back. So what makes you think that we're living in the end days?
Well, there are 10 Bible signs that we're living in the end of days. The Bible is the most phenomenal book that's ever been written, because when it was written, 25% of it was prophetic, telling the future. And these signs about the end of days do not require a theological knowledge. So people who are watching this show say, well, I don't have Bible knowledge. If you read a newspaper, you're going to get this. The first sign is the knowledge explosion. Daniel 12, the 4th chapter, God said to Daniel, I want you to shut up the book until the time of the end. That's a very important phrase, the end of days. When men shall run to and fro, and there will be a knowledge explosion. From the Garden of Eden until the 20th century, there was no knowledge explosion. In transportation, people rode horses, just as David, Julius Caesar, George Washington. And then came the car, the jet, put people on the moon. We are that generation that's having the knowledge explosion. The same thing has happened in communication. From the Garden of Eden to the 20th century, there was no differentiation. Then we came the ability of telegraph, telephone, television, telewoman. You can reach somebody on an airplane,
right,
talking to them. And now in the field of medicine, from the Garden of Eden to the 20th century, now with medicine we've had to redefine death, because we can literally keep someone alive on stimulants indefinitely.
Okay, so the first sign is knowledge explosion. Second sign.
Second sign is the rebirth of Israel. This is a very obvious sign.
How did the people early on miss this one? Because, that's a very important sign, and that didn't happen until Israel was reestablished. So how did everybody else say, oh yeah, I forgot about that one?
Well, it had to do with the time that they were living in and the theological environment in which they were raised. My father, who was a Bible preacher, in the middle 40s, made this statement: if the state of Israel is not reborn, we have a reason to believe the Bible is not true. And believe me, for my father, who was a Bible scholar, that was a monumental statement. And the Bible speaks when the disciples came to Jesus and said, give us the signs of the end of time. When will the end of the world be? And I want to say, when we talk about the end of the world, it's the end of the world as we know it.
Right.
For someone to say that the world is going to end, that's simply not right.
Right.
The world is going to exist forever.
Right, and it becomes 1,000 years of unbelievable peace and everything else. But you've got to, and we'll get into this a little later, you got to go through horrific times to get to that 1,000 years of peace. And I've often thought, when September 11th happened, I thought how quickly we will forget this. Remember how great we were and we united with everybody else,
yes,
and it didn't take too long before we forgot.
Yes.
So for us to live this way for 1,000 years, what must it be like to teach us to be humble and remember and respect each other and everything else. It must be an incredible event. We'll get into that later?
Yes, we will. That's called the tribulation period. That happens after these 10 signs. The rebirth of Israel, Jesus said in Matthew 24:32 that look at the fig tree, and when it blooms again, you will know that my coming is nigh at hand.
Okay, that's Israel.
That's Israel. Okay. And then the third is the birth of nuclear warfare. Now, this was not something that was possible in the 1900s.
I don't remember seeing nuclear war.
In the middle 50s.
Where was nuclear warfare in the Bible? Where do you find that?
Zechariah, the 14th chapter and the 12th verse. The Bible says, and this is the plague that God shall pour out on every nation that comes to fight against Jerusalem, that their flesh shall consume away while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall be consumed in their sockets, and their tongue shall be consumed in the mouth. That is a perfect picture of what happens to the human body in a nuclear blast. If you saw the videos of Hiroshima, that's exactly what happened. The H-bomb can produce heat of 150 million degrees Fahrenheit in a millisecond, and that's why the flesh can melt off of the body before your body can hit the ground. But it's a perfect description of nuclear warfare.
Okay, hang on just a second. America? Happy Friday so far?
Then the disciples said, tell us what the signs will be. The first one that Jesus gave was the sign of deception. Said that you will be living in a time when you should not allow any man to deceive you. Take heed that no man deceive you. And we are living in a world of deception.
We were just talking about this today in the office with a couple of my producers. I said, look how the darkness doesn't understand the light. Look how people can't even agree on the truth anymore.
Exactly right.
You don't see anything the same anymore. We don't even understand each other, and I've never seen that in my life. It's an amazing phenomenon. Is that what you believe? That's what he was talking about?
Exactly right. We have come to a point in our existence where we refuse to take responsibility. We refuse to be accountable for our actions. We don't have the courage to say this is good and this is evil, this is right, this is wrong, and therefore we live in this fog of political correctness where everything is perpetual deception.
Okay, next sign.
Then he talks about famines, and then he talks about pestilence. A pestilence is a medical, physical disease that medical science cannot stop. For instance, right now, I have a very dear friend who's working in Washington on a serum for the bird flu. And this is a very serious person, a very responsible person. And he looked me in the face and said, John, I want to tell you that bird flu will come to America. We are not ready for it. And when it comes, he said, many people are going to die because we're not ready for it.
I have to tell you, I was up on the bird flu thing, and I'm concerned about the bird flu as well, but it's a giant if. It's got to jump over to people, and if it does, then it'll be a horrific thing.
Yes.
But we've gone through this. But you could have said that about the bubonic plague. You could have said that about the influenza before World War I. It killed millions of people.
Four of my father's brothers died with that.
Okay. So what is the difference here? You're just saying that. You're just saying that all of these other things are
all of these things line up together.
Okay.
There has never been another generation where you had the knowledge explosion, the birth of Israel, the birth of nuclear warfare, universal deception, famines, pestilence, and then he goes on to say earthquakes. Earthquakes have been something in the Bible that God has used from time to time to communicate with people who are spiritually deaf. Moses had a pastoral problem. About 20,000 people didn't like him as the leader. God said, get those people in front of the tent of meetings, and I want to talk to them. And they got in front of the tent of meetings, God opened the ground and buried them. The message was, Moses is my man.
We haven't really seen an increase in earthquakes, though.
I believe that the specific record of the number of earthquakes has dramatically increased every century from the 15th century. I do have those numbers, and they have virtually doubled in the 20th century from the 19th century. But the point that I'm making out here is that when we reach the end of days, there's going to be an earthquake that is going to be, in vernacular words, the mother of all earthquakes, where the mountains are going to be reduced, where the islands of the sea will disappear, where I believe that the geography of Jerusalem and Israel are going to be reshaped, where the water flows from beneath the throne of God down to the Dead Sea, and the 12 trees are there for the fruit for the ages to eat, by which they will have perpetual health.
Do you believe that global warming is a possible sign?
I don't believe in global warming.
You don't believe the Earth is getting warmer?
No.
Really?
No.
No changes?
No.
Okay. So what is the next sign? Well, I mean, you know,
I believe it's getting warmer. Science tells us it's getting warmer. Yeah. I don't believe man is causing it. I don't believe that maybe man is causing it. I'm not convinced of that. I definitely don't think we can solve it. But I mean, the Earth is constantly cycling. We've seen for forever that it gets colder and warmer and colder and warmer.
I'm certainly for clean air and clean water, but I have books in my library written by very responsible people. Up into the middle 80s, we're talking about the Ice Age, where Canada was supposed to be a block of ice right now. And now we're talking about global warming, and I think the Kyoto Treaty is really nothing more than something to manipulate the economy of the United States.
Yeah, it's global socialism. Okay, yes, quickly give me that, because I've only got a minute. Okay, so give me the rest.
The next one is international television. Now, how does that work out? In the book of Revelation, in the 11th chapter, you have 2 witnesses that the Antichrist has killed. And the Bible says the world is going to see them in 1 hour. How, in heaven's name, could they see 2 dead people in the streets of Jerusalem at one time? That was not true in 1950. That was not true in my grandfather's generation. It's only true in our generation.
I remember people saying that when we saw Tiananmen Square. Yes. Remember the guy standing with a tank, and the whole world stopped to watch that on the other side of the planet.
Yes.
And I remember people saying that very thing. This is a sign.
Absolutely.
One of the signs. Okay, is that all 10?
And the last one is the sign of the scoffer. 2 Peter says, there will come in the last days scoffers saying, where's the sign of his coming, the coming of Christ? The very fact that there's skepticism, so much skepticism, saying you people are crazy believing in this, is a literal sign that Christ is going to appear.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to show you some eerie similarities in the ways that Christians and Muslims see the end of days, and are they upon us? Also, what does it look like? What can we do? Etc., etc. Coming up.